Okay. Oh no. What are you doing, cat? You trying to catch one of your own hairballs? Yeah? What do you... Okay, you just stay over there and be less annoying than you have been. Okay, so we're continuing on with laws. Things to do when certain situations are met. These laws, again, are mainly, these laws here in Deuteronomy do not overwrite or supersede or nullify the laws that were previously given in the previous books, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. These laws tend to be written more with the mindset of them living in the land as a settled people, rather than a sedentary or a nomadic existence that they had been doing so far, where they traveled from place to place all the time. Cat, you just, oh my, you just, stop that right now. Come on, get out of the way. Gosh. Anyway, excuse me. These laws are written more from the perspective of them being in the land as a settled people, rather than a wandering people that travel around in a big group all the time from place to place and never stay in any one place for very long. We're not really restating the sacrifice laws. We've already given those in great detail in previous books. Except to just tell them what to do now they're living in the land, how to conduct themselves as they live in the land, and the sanctuary or the tabernacle is at a specific site, and things like that. I'm just, this cat is just all over the place, and I don't know what she's planning on doing next. It's going to be a problem with the camera here in the bedroom, because the cats can much more easily get into it this way. When I was doing this out in the living room, I would sometimes put the cats in the bedroom and shut the door, but I'm not going to do that now because that would make it way too stuffy in here. And even if I did, I mean, the door was right behind me, and they would just stay outside the door and scratch on it and meow the whole time, and it'd be extremely annoying and distracting. I'm just going to have to kind of get used to it and condition them not to bother this thing while it's up on the table being used like this. And it'll happen in time, but cats are very stubborn creatures, so... Look at that one. Oh, here she comes. Okay, you stop that. You just go and take your morning nap, cat. That's the thing for you to do right now. Just go take a nap. The other cats are doing that. Well, maybe not. I take that back. They're not really doing that. This is the cat's head. You stop this. I don't like how close you are to this camera, cat. That little tail you've got whipping around down there. Oh no, man, you're trying to get even closer. But we can't have this guy. You go over there. Okay, so here we go. Continuing. If a man is found slain, lying in a field in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess, and it is not known who killed him, your elders, so an unsolved murder, a mystery, in other words. We would call these today a mystery. Bring out the detectives, bring out the major case squad. Your elders and judges shall go out and measure the distance from the body to the neighboring towns. Then the elders of the town nearest to the body shall take a heifer that has never been worked and has never worn a yoke. So one that has not lived up to her full potential yet. And lead her down to a valley that has not been plowed or planted, and where there is a flowing stream. There in the valley they are to break the heifer's neck. The priests, the sons of Levi, shall step forward, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister and to pronounce blessings in the name of the Lord, and to decide all cases of dispute and assault. So they were the detectives, basically. The closest thing they had to detectives. We read before about how they also served as medics, and they also served as building inspectors when they studied the mildew and mold growing on the insides of buildings. So these priests had many different roles. It wasn't just about offering sacrifices in the tabernacle. They did many other things. There's a cat. Oh my goodness. Oh. Then all the elders of the... wait, yes, okay, that's right. Then all the elders of the town nearest the body shall walk... I'm guessing the town that is nearest the body is presumed to be the town where the murderer came from. Quit that. Ugh, she's annoying. I presume the town where nearest the body is presumed to be where the murderer came from. Very annoying. Very, very annoying. And all the elders of the town nearest the body shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the valley. And they shall declare, our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. Accept this atonement for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed, O Lord, and do not hold your people guilty of the blood of an innocent man. And the bloodshed will be atoned for. So you will purge from yourselves the guilt of shedding innocent blood, since you have done what is right in the eyes of the Lord. Again, I'm assuming the town nearest the body is kind of assumed to be guilty, even if they weren't. They're taking responsibility for it, although declaring their innocence in the process. When you go, so they're not really investigating the crime to see who did it. They don't really have who done it. They don't have the ability to determine that. What they're doing here basically is just absolving themselves of the responsibility for it, so that God does not hold it against them. In that way, it doesn't even really matter if the town is responsible for it. If it's an unsolved murder, and they don't know who committed the crime. They don't know for certain whether or not it was someone who belonged to that town. That town is stepping up and absolving itself of the blame. It's possible, though, the murderer isn't from that town. But this is what God wants them to do in these sorts of situations. So doing this is right in God's eyes, and not doing it would not be right in God's eyes. When you go to war against your enemies, so this is another wartime rule. We just had a whole bunch of them in the previous chapter. Now we have another one. Excuse me. When you go to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands, and you take captives. What are you doing, cat? Oh no. If you notice among the captives a beautiful woman, these captives would be women and children. Let's see here. We read back in the previous chapter about captives. Let's see here. Where are they? And this is chapter 20, verse 12. If you're going against warfare against a distant city, and they refuse to make peace, and you fight them, defeat them, when the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. And as for the women, the children, and the livestock, you may take these. So the captives would be women and children. All the men would be killed in the battle. Why don't you just go calm down somewhere? There. So you take captives. If you notice among the captives a beautiful woman, and are attracted to her, you may take her as your wife. This was ancient warfare. That's just how things were done back then. Bring her into your home and have her shave her head, trim her nails. Now, I don't know exactly what ancient manicures were like. I don't know exactly what the woman's nails would have looked like beforehand, but they're being trimmed now to look like just, plain nails, I guess. And put aside the clothes she was wearing when she was captured. After she has lived in your house and mourned her father and mother for a full month, so she is given time to grieve. She is given a month to mourn her former way of life, which was destroyed in the battle. Then you may go to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. If you are not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You must not sell her or treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her. So you were allowed to marry captive women that you took in warfare, but even there were restraints put on your natural tendencies. And even then there was some respect given to the captured woman, who was not supposed to be treated like a slave, and was supposed to be allowed time to grieve and mourn her former way of life. So even though the custom of taking women as captives of war was allowed, there were still restraints put on it, and caveats put on it. If a man has 2 wives, and we've seen this before, haven't we? This is not a new thing. We've seen this condition before. And he loves one but not the other. Well, we've seen that before too. That goes back to Jacob. And both bear him sons. But the firstborn is the son of the wife he does not love. This makes me think a lot of Jacob now, doesn't it? This makes me think like this law was written specifically to address the Jacob situation. When he wills his property to his sons, he must not give the rights to the firstborn to the son of the wife he loves in preference to his actual firstborn, the son of the wife he does not love. He must acknowledge the son of his unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double share of all he has. That son is the first sign of his father's strength. The right to the firstborn belongs to him. That sounds to me like it's written pretty much specifically to address the Jacob favoritism problem now, huh? I'm not entirely sure what double share means. Does that mean he gets double a share of any other son, or does that mean he gets 2 portions out of everything his father has? I'm not entirely certain how they divvied that up. At any rate, you're not really supposed to have 2 wives. There's no specific command against it, but the pattern and the precedent is clearly that you're only supposed to have 1. And just about every example we see in the Old Testament of men having multiple wives ends up being a bad thing. Almost always when this happens, it leads to strife and drama that otherwise wouldn't need to happen. So I think this is one of those things where God was allowing mankind to realize through hard experience over the years that marrying multiple wives really isn't a great idea. Although there is not a specific command against it. However, the precedent and the pattern that he has established clearly indicates that it is not his preference. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother, and who will not listen to them when they discipline him, so the mother is involved here. It's not just the father's issue. His father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of his town. They shall say to the elders, "This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a profligate and a drunkard." So clearly this is an adult son. This is a son who's old enough to know better and old enough to making his own decisions. Not a child. Then all the men of his town shall stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and will be afraid. This is not one of those kinds of laws that's designed to correct people's behavior by setting a bad example. As I said before, though, unfortunately, this just doesn't actually happen in actual human experience. This just doesn't happen very often. This is one of those things where, and we'll talk about this, in the New Testament when Paul explains the nature of the law in Galatians and Romans and places like that, where the law itself is perfect and fine, but it's limited by human nature. Like the law here is intended to bring about a change of attitude in the people's hearts But it doesn't really do that because human nature, as sinful and flawed as it is, doesn't really work that way. You know, to some degree, yes, maybe, but not like it's supposed to. Like I said before, judgment doesn't really bring about repentance. It should, but because we don't respond the way we're supposed to, we tend not to repent when we're being judged. When someone else is judged, we tend not to take that lesson to heart as though it could apply to us too if we find ourselves in the same situation. We tend not to do that. We might. There may be a small, it was supposed to. Okay, that's the intent. That's the goal. That's the plan behind it. That's the purpose behind it. But human nature being what it is, sinful and flawed, we really don't do that very much. So this is an example of the law being perfect, but human nature being less than perfect. So the law does not bring about the intended effect because human nature just doesn't respond to it that way. If a man guilty of a capital offense is put to death, and his body is hung on a tree, you must not leave his body on the tree overnight. This is going to be a major thing, of course, in the crucifixion story, because Jesus will, in fact, be hung on a tree. Be sure to bury him that same day, because that's why they needed to take the body down before sunset on that day in the crucifixion. Because anyone who is hung on a tree is under God's curse. You must not desecrate the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. So if you're a capital offender, now I'm thinking in this context, now later on, we think of this in the crucifixion context, because this rule is going to be very important when it comes to the crucifixion, because Jesus will be declared guilty of a capital offense. He will be hung on a tree, and they will need to get his body down from that tree, the cross, before sunset, which would be the prohibition here, to take him down before sunset, not leave it there overnight. And that's the other two criminals who were crucified at the same time were also under that. That applied to them as well, which is why they went ahead and broke their legs to hurry up their deaths, whereas Jesus already died before that. So this becomes important then. And in that context, of course, they are alive. They're hanging on the tree alive. I'm thinking in this context, when it's originally given, since all the capital offenses we've seen so far have resulted in death by stoning, I'm thinking that the original context here is that you kill the person and then you hang him up on a tree, kind of like to humiliate or be a public, proclamation to other people not to do what this guy did. We see a pagan example of this and later on, when Saul and his son Jonathan are killed in battle at the end of 1 Samuel, beginning of 2 Samuel. And the enemies take their bodies and hang them on display to embarrass and humiliate them. And David got mad about that. So that is an example of it being done like to shame a defeated enemy. So I'm thinking that this original context here is probably, again, because all their capital offenses were done by stone. In fact, the Jews originally wanted to stone Jesus. Multiple times in the Gospels, they get themselves ready to stone him. And Stephen is stoned in Acts. So the capital offense penalty by the Jews would have been stoning. So if you're hanging someone on a tree who's guilty of a capital offense, it would be after he is dead by stoning. In that case, it would be some sort of humiliation or shame, or possibly a corrective example to others not to do what this guy did. Again, human nature doesn't really work that way, so when other people see this body hanging on a tree, most people are not going to think to themselves, well, I better not do what that guy did. Somewhat, that might happen somewhat, but for the most part, they're just going to say, that guy did something bad. That's just what human nature does. We don't see ourselves as guilty the way that we see other people as guilty. And again, that's an example of the law being limited, not because there's anything wrong with it, but because there's something wrong with us.